Hi, everybody. This is Kara Thrasher Livingston with Senior and Disability Services Training, and this will be our second webinar about the agenda that you can now see on your screen, hopefully. We're going to talk about some new regulations and new conditions of participation and forms. It's kind of sort of a little mixed bag, but we'll get to all these things today. But first, a couple of reminders about how to participate in the webinar. You have joined us through a computer, or perhaps you're listening to the audio part on the phone. You can see our display, our screen. You can see me on the webcam. And you don't want to close out that main screen that says welcome to the webinar. That's where we're going to show our PowerPoint and other documents. You can hear us through your audio source, either phone or computer. Either one works just fine. Because you are on phone or computer audio, you will not be able to share your audio. So if you want to interact with us, you'll need to be typing into the question area your questions and comments. So you'll probably be able to locate that, our little icon for that, at the top of your screen. If you don't see it, you might see a little orange or red square with a white arrow inside it, where you click on that and you just open up a chat area. It might say questions or chat. That is how you're going to write in your comments. So if you want to just take a minute and locate that area and just type in something, say hello to us and tell us how the weather is where you are. It's sunny here in Anchorage. If you've called on the phone, you've called a random long distance number. That's not an Alaskan number, but we are right here in Anchorage speaking with you. So, okay. Everybody's doing a great job of writing in the, great, it's sunny and it's pretty nice in Juneau, so good for you. I'm glad to hear that. That's where you're going to write in your comments and your questions, and it's beautiful in Ketchikan. Thank you. I'm happy to know all this. So you'll write in your comments and questions there, and when we have a nice big session like this with lots of people, we just set it so that you can see the names of other attendees, but we don't do formal introductions, which is fine. It would take too long, but just know that that's where you're not alone, and there's lots of people in the webinar, probably about 35 people right now. And you'll interact with our text right there. We'll read out the questions and do our best to answer them as we go. We are developing an FAQ list, frequently asked questions list, so we can get all of your questions and answer them. There may be some that won't be answered or completely answered during this session, and that's okay. We need to know what your thoughts are so we can develop response to them. I am joined by our training team and our representative from our policy unit. So I have Sina Fisher, I have Delight Mel's trainers with us here, and I have Dee Grubbs, who represents our policy unit at SDS. So we'll do our best to put answers together for you and help get this knowledge to you. Let me take a quick Q&A here about the crowd or the attendees. How many of you were here yesterday? If you can find that little hand, hit that little hand and just raise your hand. Do you see a little circle with a hand in the middle? If you were here yesterday, raise your hand. Did you see this? Did you do this webinar yesterday? If you did, great. If not, it's okay. All right, I just see one person who raised their hand. That's perfectly fine. You know, yesterday I didn't get a chance to delve into the nursing oversight and care management conditions of participation. So that'll be here. Of course, we'll do that today, and we'll get the recording up on YouTube afterwards, and we can also email you the handouts. Speaking of handouts, you should see somewhere in your webinar controls an icon that allows you to open up and download handouts. There are 5 handouts in the download handout area right now. Give it a try. If you are unsuccessful downloading them, do not worry. We'd be happy to email them to you instead or as well. Just need to write me a little note in the question area that says you would like them to be emailed to you. It's all the presentation materials that we'll have today. Okay, so if our webinar, if your computer system becomes, or your device becomes unattached to the internet after a while, if the internet breaks or my internet breaks, just wait for it to come back and we'll come back into the session. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes we do have a break in internet and folks think that I'm gone and the webinar is over. That's not the case. Just give it a minute or two to come back and we'll just join back in. And the way you do that is to go back to your email and just click on that link by which you entered the session today. All right. So today we're going to talk about a few different things. We're going to talk about provider conditions of participation, um, a new document that has been referred to in new regulation set, which we'll look at. Um, it's referred to in regs, so it's becoming effective today. This webinar was actually developed. We had it yesterday, so this is June 12th on it, but June 12th and 13th. New specialized medical equipment list, same thing, effective today. New nursing oversight and care management conditions of participation, and new nursing oversight and care management regulations, which we'll do a quick kind of touchstone of the old regulations to the new. We'll compare, and we'll have two new forms to look at that are required for nursing oversight and care management. And then within that same regulation document, it refers to the top documents there, provider conditions of participation, new fee list, and the NOCM conditions of participation. You definitely want to write your questions in as they go. I know some of us are care coordinators and some of us are other professionals working within our services, not doing care coordination. Provider conditions of participation affect all of us. So we're going to look at those first. And if it's going to be nice to me, it'll pop up. And if it's not going to be nice, then I'll have to try something else, but just give it a second. Okay. So we have our document. Provider conditions of participation are referred to in regulation. This is our new provider conditions of participation. And what I've done here is highlight the differences from the old to the new. Much of the document remains the same. I just want to call attention to, the highlights of what's new. We don't have to read out the whole thing because we certainly don't have time for that. But, you're welcome to check it out and submit questions after the fact as well. You don't have to develop and submit all of your questions, today. So this is just to let you know your resources. I'll show you where you can find these things on the website too, so you can share that with others, and you can consider them after the fact as well, after this webinar, and they become effective today. Okay, so our new policy and procedures, our newest ones are new to the list, and this is for your certification, policies and procedures that you would develop and submit for review, independence and inclusion policy and procedure, and a person-centered practice policy and procedure. And I just have this highlight here to remind us to check the list of policies and procedures that are submitted when it comes to certification for all providers. A reminder about the revision date, because regulations tend to take quite a while to go through the process that they go through. Sometimes we'll see things like this where the date of creation or the final draft is quite a while ago, and then the revision date is actually the most current one. And then when the regulation comes out, it actually has an effective date written right on it with a pen, and you'll see that in the document that I'll share with you in just a bit. Okay, the rest of the provider conditions of participation that's not highlighted remains the same wording as it has been. I am assuming that we're all associated with, or we are certified providers, so I'm not going to read out the whole thing. I do want to bring to your attention a difference here. This is added in to our provider conditions of participation for waiver providers. So what this says here is that a provider needs to maintain financial records to show capacity at all times to meet at least 3 months of operating expenses. And then it spells out the funds to pay salaries, maintain general liability and workers' comp insurance, maintain operations in a physical office space, and ensure service delivery to all recipients served by the provider. Okay, so that's new to these conditions of participation. My little bubble note here is my reminder to talk about the intent of this. The intent is to help assure stability of agencies which are serving people, vulnerable people. And it is also intended to match this exact same requirement, which has been in the personal care services conditions of participation for quite a long time. So you sometimes see these types of things happen when changes like this happen when services have rules that are around serving the same population or under the umbrella of long-term services and supports. So this brings it into alignment with our other condition of participation for personal care. And the overarching intent of it is to make sure that the agency has stability. Now, I did want to point out that this is not a condition of certification. In other words, certification will not be asking providers to submit financial records. It's a condition of compliance. So it's for compliance, but is not something that you would submit or be asked to submit for certification. Okay. What are your questions? While you're thinking of your questions, I'm going to freeze my screen and go to another part of this document so you can consider it. Again, it's not something that would be, brought forth as a certification requirement, but it's a compliance requirement for an agency. Okay, I don't have any other updates in this document. And we did put a copy into the downloads and we can email you it as well. Questions, thoughts? Can we explain 4? Maintain or ensure service delivery to all recipients served by the provider. It just means that a provider has to have financial capacity to make sure that services are delivered. And my best thought on it is it's not getting into the weeds of like whether there are staff or whether people aren't able to be served because of the infinite variations in life. Just has to be, the agency has something to rely on in order to, we don't want agencies to fold suddenly because of financial problems without something to hold them up in that area. How are agencies showing proof? Bank statements. Again, we're not asking to show proof. How are we to accumulate funds to meet the requirements if the rates are going to be cut? Okay, my best thoughts on this right now, or my best answers are that it brings it into equity with our personal care requirements. Number one actually is the obligation to meet needs of people we serve and be stable as an agency for people we serve. And then it brings it into equity with equal, requirement for personal care, as personal care agencies have had for quite a long time. As far as showing proof goes, my best thought on that is that since this is not a condition of certification, is that when you would be requested to show proof on this would be if an agency's story starts to change where there's an investigation or something like that, or there are problems and you get a requirement to turn over records. So those are things that I cannot speak to specifically because those are like custom stories. It's situational. So my best answer is that if you have bank statement, if that happens to an agency, I'm not even going to say you, like a hypothetical agency, if that happened, then they would get communication about what they would have to bring forth. And it could be bank statements, it could be other things, it could be pretty much anything that an agency would rely on to make sure that those items 1 through 4 happened. Any kind of assets that could be turned into those things. So I'm not going to get into that. I mean, it's really much more, custom than that, but generally speaking, okay. Where could we find a sample policy on independence and inclusion? I do not have sample policies for any of the policies that we require. That would be up to your agency to bring forth, because your agency is working with person-centered, person-directed services under person regs, which have a piece of person-centeredness in them. I would probably look to those regs and look at ways that my agency upholds them and make them into a policy and a procedure, but we don't have a sample to go by. I unfortunately I cannot speak to the rate cut questions at all, but I understand. I read it out. I do understand it as a concern. And as far as sharing questions and concerns in the chat area or question area, I fully encourage you to do that, even if I can't speak to them or answer them, because it's a communication. It comes from you as a provider doing this work in our community. So it's very important. We can use it to develop FAQs and also to try to find more resources and answers for people. Okay, so even if I don't answer it, it doesn't mean that it's not important, or if I can't answer it, it's still important. Okay, so our provider conditions of participation. I am going to sort of go a little fast here. I don't want to run out of time and have people stuck with things they didn't talk about, but I'm sort of going towards the documents that aren't associated with NOCM first, because we get them out of the way, if you will. Okay. Specialized medical equipment fee schedule. If it's going to be nice and open for me. It's thinking. Okay. So specialized medical equipment, it's a list of items that waivers could potentially pay for somebody upon approval. And it's also other things that are special to the item, like repairs. So most of us probably know that this fee schedule has items on it that sometimes change and sometimes don't change. But the biggest change, nothing has changed on this fee schedule except coding, procedure coding. And this one here has changed. All right, no, none of the items have changed and none of the reimbursement rates have changed. Right, so we have code changes here and here. Okay, the only other thing I want to call attention to, and it's not really a change for today's purposes, but personal emergency response systems are still under SME, but they're only available to our CFC customers because of the evolution and implementation of CFC. And those are the changes on our rate chart, our SME fee schedule, as they call it. All right, so I'm going to freeze on that. What are your questions about SME fee schedule? Do you have any? Just answering a quick question here by typing, okay? All right, I'm sending. All right. All right. So I just answered a couple of questions by text that I could. I do want to go to our nursing oversight and care management conditions of participation. So we're kind of switching gears here. I want to talk about the conditions of participation. Actually, you know what I want to do? I'll go back a little bit here. Hang on. I want to review our NOCM regs as they stand at as they have been in the past. Okay, as of today, we have our new regulations, and we'll look at those too. Okay, so I just want to bring it back a little bit to the purpose of nursing oversight and care management, so that we all can kind of shift gears a little bit and understand about the purpose of it. So there's a few things to think about when we approach the subject. We need to think about, first of all, eligibility for it. And it's always been associated with our CCMC waivers and our IDD waivers. Okay, so a person who's eligible for CCMC and for NOCM with IDD, okay, needs to experience these kinds of conditions or circumstances: be under 22, have medical condition that would require care in a general acute care hospital or nursing facility for more than 30 days a year, but for the provision of home and community-based waiver services. A person who has a severe chronic physical condition that results in a prolonged dependency on medical care or technology to maintain their health. The person experiences periods of acute exacerbation or life-threatening conditions, needs extraordinary supervision and observation, and either needs frequent or life-saving administration of specialized treatment or is dependent on mechanical support devices and has needs for level of care which is provided in a nursing facility. We did put this PowerPoint into the downloads, so you can have, there's a copy of it in there already. It's a PDF copy, but you can have it. So that's eligibility for CCMC, okay? So until today, our previous NOCM, this is just comparing the old to the new, previous NOCM understanding in our regulation stated that the department would require nursing oversight and care management for CCMC children and young adults, or individuals with intellectual developmental disability, folks with the IDD waiver, if the person, but for their age, met those same care needs. Okay, so any age IDD, as long as they had the same care needs as CCMC, could access nursing oversight and care management. So what nursing oversight and care management continues to be and is that there's a plan made by a nurse and employed by a home and community-based waiver services provider. And what NOCM services are and have been is that a nurse conducts an assessment to find out about the person's medical care needs, developing a nursing plan to put in their plan of care, which addresses health and safety, medical care needs, training for paid and unpaid providers to perform delegated nursing duties. The nurse would participate in the planning of their care. They would evaluate services and make sure that they're delivered within the nursing plan, and that they continue to be necessary to protect health, safety, and welfare, and services can change to meet people's needs depending on their condition. We would rely on the nurse to do that. And that is the spirit of NOCM and continues to be. The new regulations aren't so very different, but we'll look at that, okay? There are some essential differences. The NOCM nurse would remain in contact with the recipient in a manner and frequency appropriate to their needs and the care they need. The contact would require at least one on-site evaluation every 90 days. And the person and people who were doing cares that were delegated to them, nursing duties which were delegated, would be in attendance. Now, delegation regulations are different than these. Nursing care delegation regs are over top of all of our regs. So we would rely on nurses to create that plan and delegate tasks that could be done by our unskilled, or not that people don't have skills, but they're not a licensed nurse. Maybe they are, but usually our DSP staff, we classify them as folks who aren't nurses. So certain cares could be delegated to people and to family members, not just staff. Okay. And then our regulation had, as it does now still, non-duplication of the services that would be provided by other sources, IAT, specialized private duty nursing, or home health, or their clinic care or clinical team, medical team. NOCM wouldn't duplicate that. Okay, so let's take a look at our new NOCM regs, and we'll go back to the conditions of participation in just a bit, okay? So let's take a look at our new regulations. This is the way they look when they come out new. They're not on our website yet, the regulations website. It's very typical. They get, regulations have a whole life cycle. They get proposed, and then they get, they get reviewed, and the public reviews them, stakeholders provide input, then they get changed, and then they get signed and implemented with a certain date. And so that results in this document, which tells the whole entire story in a way where you can see the signatures and the dates, and we don't have to look at all of these. This is interesting right now. If we did, I think we put in a copy. Yep, we put a copy in here for you. This is the effective date, which is interesting. And then in July 2019, we'll probably see it get migrated onto the website so we can look at it online. Okay, but until then, we have this PDF document. And so when we have regs regs can involve taking out and putting in words. It can also involve repealing and replacing of entire sections. So what we have here is a relatively short document which has replacement words and inserted words, and there's no sections that have been repealed and replaced entirely. Okay, so my little notes to myself about reg changes: when you see capital words, those are ones that are deleted, and the bolded words replace them. If it's amended, the section still exists with some wording changed or inserted. So it will say amended. It's amended to read. Okay, so nothing's been taken away. There's just some of the words have been changed. Okay, so the biggest change up front here for NOCM is not a required service. It is not required in CCMC. The department may authorize it as opposed to will require. Request for NOCM is subject to review and approval by Senior and Disability Services. Okay, so we do have a few intent statements here. The intent of this is that the individual could start getting other services if there is a wait for NOCM. We understood that sometimes it takes a long time to find a NOCM nurse, or perhaps, that story of starting or renewing a waiver or amending a waiver, there can be changes. And so there may not be, in other words, a care coordinator can request the service of NOCM without an actual provider identified, and it can be reviewed and approved. The purpose of that is that if the person can get other services started without NOCM if they're not able to find that right away. All right, so that's one of the intents of the may authorize as opposed to will require. A support plan, otherwise known as a plan of care, can be approved without a provider designated yet. The other point of it would be for families to have choice. Some people might have families, young people, they would have CCMC as their waiver, but they may choose not to receive NOCM. So previously it was a requirement, but a family could, or an individual could choose not to have NOCM. So if they're not going to have that, then the support plan needs to explain how their healthcare needs are being met for their daily life. Okay, how are they qualify for CCMC and they have a lot of healthcare needs on a daily basis, but how will those needs be met? So some examples of that over in our discussion and kind of trying to puzzle out what that means. Um, some examples would be where perhaps a family member is a nurse and is caring for the child, and they don't want NOCM because they are a nurse. So, okay, perhaps they're not a nurse, but they're extremely experienced mom or other family member who cares for the child and doesn't see the need or use of NOCM. And then we do have some individuals who are undergoing end of life care. So, it's different kinds of services that are in place and not necessarily the NOCM style of service that would happen. So that's a situation where a person and family might not, choose NOCM. Okay, so they don't have to have something that they don't need. So people should, of course, be fully educated. People in their families should be educated as to what NOCM is and what they can do. A care coordinator can help with that. And then once they choose the NOCM service, then the nurse who does that would further educate a family about what that would look like. Okay. Questions here. How do agencies meet the training requirement for DSP oversight? Um, that's a little off topic. That has to do with their certification and things like that. And then if it's just strictly for NOCM, the training is done by the nurse for those cares. Can the NOCM agency supplying care discontinue their service even though CCMC states NOCM needs to listed? Okay. Best answer to that is that any provider can discontinue service. They need to make a plan for how the needs would be met and then like some kind of a transition plan to a new NOCM nurse. Okay, so my CCMC can eliminate NOCM service if my parents are doing everything and they have medical background. Yes. And that has to be shown in the plan. I mean, we can't just say it super plain. I love how plain you said it. That's great. But we have to have the evidence in the plan that that's how the needs are being met. All right. Good questions. So yesterday, folks were asking if SDS would deny NOCM because it's requested in a plan. Best answer to that is plain and simple answer is yes, but because CCMC has the the circumstances that the person has to experience to qualify for it, we don't imagine that there would be very many that would be denied. And if it was to be denied, it would be a consultation with our internal staff who are experts in these things. And it wouldn't really, I mean, like any service could be denied, it would have to be apparent that it was either A, we don't have enough information to approve it, or B, it wouldn't be necessary, meaning they don't meet the criteria of needing that service. So we're not sure what that might look like because to meet CCMC, you have those needs. Of course, people do change, needs change. Sometimes people don't need the same kinds of care because their medical conditions have improved over time. So that's another piece of it. All right, still available to CCMC, and it is still available to IDD population if their needs are the same as CCMC, but for age. Okay. The rest of it is, my notices here are the plan of care is being renamed support plan. So you'll see the word of care taken in caps and they're coming out, but support plan is going in. So we're kind of formally adopting the word support plan. They're still provided by a registered nurse qualified to practice under AS 08 because it's a little redundant to say licensed because AS 08 is professional licensing regs. And then 7AAC 105.200 is the list of eligible Medicaid providers, which includes nurses and ANPs and people like that. So it's basically a registered nurse. Okay. They could be an ANP or other, there are other qualifications that are under that, but it's going to be basically a registered nurse. They need to be provided in compliance with the new conditions of participation, which we'll look at in just a minute. The rest of it doesn't have a whole lot of changes. We do have support plan instead of plan of care in a format provided by the department. And this is where it begins to introduce two forms that are required. A nursing plan, which is the NOCM care plan document, which we can look at today, which we can also provide you a copy of, and what it outlines. So we've got a training plan. So they must have both the care plan and the training plan. So the care plan and training plan are required. The NOCM nurse fills them out, provides them to the family, of course, and staff, that's their training plan, and the care coordinator. So the plan specifies training that the recipient and their paid and unpaid caregivers are getting from that NOCM nurse to perform medical care tasks necessary to meet their needs, instead of delegated nursing duties under this section. Okay, so when we look at the NOCM conditions of participation, you might see more answers to your questions. NOCM nurses can do this training, but if there are certain pieces of the training that another person could train, they can also call into play another qualified person to train, and that would all be in their plan. Okay, they still participate in their plan of care development. They still provide oversight to evaluate whether the services are delivered in accordance to the plan and promote health, safety, and welfare of the person. Services are reasonable and necessary, and additional training is necessary for recipient or recipients' paid and unpaid caregivers. So just some tweaking of words there. The intent there is that training is okay in the delegation context, but also not held to just delegation context under nursing regs. And nursing regs are there to give shape to actual delegation. And the rest of it doesn't have changes. If you look at these documents, you'll see kind of lining out and, corrections and, formatting notes and things like that. This is all normal for regs when they're getting finished. They still will be referenced in regulations so that they become regulation. They've got lots of nice handwritten notes for us here about the formatting and things like that. I do want to look at the nursing oversight and care management conditions of participation. I will in just 1 minute here. But here you have kind of the whole story of the evolution of the regs and the different consultations that happen with different offices to review them and review the language in its final draft form, giving notices of changes, of course, to, help invite our stakeholders to give comments and where those happened and when they were. And they just attach the whole thing. It's the story of the evolution of the reg and the reg itself in its final draft with its handwritten notes. And we don't have to look at all of this, but you are certainly welcome to look at it in its entirety. If you want to just download it or want to email it to you, you can grab it and take a look at the whole story. And they give a public notice with a seal, and they give an ad in the paper too, and they kind of have like a little clipping at the end. So it's interesting to see how long it takes. This is a good example of what reg packages really look like. I'm going to go back up to the top, and I'm going to call forth our NOCM conditions of participation. Please provide me your questions while I do that. Okay, question says, does the guardian have to give a NOCM nurse 30-day notice to discontinue the service? Can we just make that change on the renewal or with an amendment if people do not want the nursing oversight and care management service? Let me see if there's anything in the conditions of participation that get closer to that. If there isn't, then we'll probably put that on our FAQs. It's a great question. So submit amendments for those who want to opt out. I guess opting out is not my favorite way to describe it, but okay, if people want to choose to not have NOCM anymore, then they would submit an amendment. The care coordinator would submit an amendment which explains how the needs are met in other ways. Okay, so yes, I get that I've been clear enough that it's not a required service for CCMC, but we don't imagine that, again, the reason it changed is because folks had been commenting about the need to start a waiver without NOCM because of the difficulty to find NOCM. And also some people were feeling like it was met in other ways. So they felt that they didn't need NOCM. So, or just wasn't appropriate for that particular child/young person. Okay, so our whole document is new here, so I'm not going to highlight the whole document, but I do want to, just kind of quickly review it with you. I don't want to read out the whole thing. You can access it on our website. I'll show you how. Will make more sense for those of us who may be viewing this recording, a recording of this later. But anyway, our nursing oversight and care management conditions of participation spell out who this is for and who does what. The NOCM services are provided by a registered nurse who's certified, employed by a certified provider agency. So a provider agency is going to be certified and enrolled to provide this service, and a NOCM nurse does the work. All right. So we have administrative rules around it, just like all the other waiver services. Nursing oversight and care management, for those agencies who are currently providing that, we wanted to let you know that this is all new, but we're getting set to send out a letter from Provider Certification and Compliance to ask our current NOCM certified and enrolled agencies to designate a program admin. And a lot of people have been asking, when will this have to be done now? Do I have to redo work I've already done? Generally, the answer is no, you're not going to redo work you've already done. This is not intended to be a big burden on your certification qualifications at all. We'll simply ask for ask for a program admin who meets the requirements here. Okay, so it's somebody who will oversee uh, by review the delivery of nursing oversight and management services, including monitoring amount, duration, and scope to assure delivery is in the plan, reviewing the nurse's work product, evaluating effectiveness and continuing need, develop the corrective action plan if needed, submitting required reports to SDS, including critical incident reports. That's a manager that makes sure those things happen. You can use whatever title the agency would use for that person. The other qualifications are they have to be at least 21 and qualified through experience in education and human services field as laid out below. So the program admin doesn't have to be a nurse, but they could be a nurse. Okay, so maybe your agency has a program admin who could also, govern as an admin in your agency, your NOCM staff, nursing staff. Okay. So this lays out their qualification requirements as the admin. Okay. And then for the nurse, NOCM nurse, they need to be at least 18 and qualified through education and experience, and they need to have these kinds of degrees here. They have to, in addition to being a nurse, they have to have certain skills about the population, to knowledge about the population we serve. Individuals with disabilities, experience with with this population, laws and policies related to nursing oversight and care management, terminology, elements of nursing oversight and care management, and resources available to be able to give training to people, their family, and their caregivers. Be able to develop and implement a nursing plan and a training plan for people who would be giving care, and the person should they care for themselves in some way. The ability to organize, evaluate, and present information, and to work with professional and support staff. Most nurses will have those skills. Certainly nurses who are already doing NOCM have these qualifications. Okay, agencies are going to be, as this matches all of our other conditions of participation for specific services, to develop your own quality management plan. And to submit billing for NOCM after it has done and it's in an approved plan. The other way around, it's in an approved plan, then it is completed per regulation. Okay, there's a mileage distance of service qualification for NOCM. So that needs to be approved in a support plan if NOCM services were going to be done at a location over 200 miles away from the office of the agency. And that would be depicted in the plan to help those who are serving our rural community recipients. Provider responsibilities for the process. NOCM is also a person-centered service which helps people live the life they choose in their community and foster their independence as much as possible, to help the person remain at home and in the community, and to treat people with dignity and respect in the provision of this service. The spirit of NOCM really came about to help serve a relatively small population of people who just live with medical complexity and who are not going to live in a hospital or a nursing home, particularly our young people, our children who would just want to, grow up in a family like other children do, yet they have a need for, this extraordinary care. So that's just talking about the spirit of NOCM and putting it out in the condition of participation. So what does the nurse do? They make sure that their assessment and planning process is timely once they're engaged and the decision has been made. I'm choosing you, you'll be my NOCM nurse. Help everybody who's on that person's care team understand what NOCM is, and talk about how to make contact with that nurse and how we're going to, how do we expect to contact each other. Being a collaborator on the team with a support plan, giving a copy of the nursing plan and training plan to the care coordinator, consulting with the person and the representative and caregivers to determine about the necessary medical tasks, who will perform them and what training is needed. Put the findings in their nursing and training plan and review the plan nursing and training plans with the person and their family and paid and unpaid caregivers. The NOCM nurse gives a copy of the nursing plan and training plan to SDS, the individual, and all those who would receive training within 10 business days of receiving the pre-authorization approval from SDS. They make sure that the caregivers are adequately trained and facilitate and provide the training and support a person's independence as much as possible. Recipient contacts. The content of a contact would be evaluating whether changes or adjustments are needed, providing training plans and nursing plans if adjustments were made, discussing the performance of medical care tasks, case notes, documenting case notes of contacts, and the way the contact was made and the content, meaningful content within that contact, and whether the services were delivered in a satisfactory way. If there were problems and there need to be more training provided, they would include the name and relationship of the recipient to the recipient of the caregiver, so we can identify who needs training. And contacts with other medical professionals to coordinate medical care, so the person has, a continuous care needs known to their whole team, including other medical professionals. The NOCM nurse contacts medical care service providers as needed. And again, that continuum of care is the emphasis here between the different teams. There are many times like bigger medical teams that serve the same person. So to function as that conduit of service of information between and amongst those teams. So when a NOCM nurse notices material changes or concerns regarding a person's health, they report that immediately to their care coordinator, recipient's representative, and as appropriate to other providers of services. Okay, so changes, material changes, big changes, then, or concerns, they communicate those. Okay, so this is a quick review of our nursing oversight and care management services conditions of participation. Let's move to a few other documents to take a look at. Let me get down to the part of that here that I want to call them up with. Okay, let me freeze on here and I'm going to grab my documents. Questions while I'm doing that? Thoughts, questions? We're going to look at the training plan and we're going to look at the nursing plan. Okay, so let's take out a few things. I will take out the PowerPoint and I will take out the provider conditions of participation out of our downloads, and I will put in the care plan, nursing plan, and the training plan. All right, for those of you who are maybe watching a video, because we'll post this on our YouTube channel, we'll show you how to find those on the web. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at the nursing care plan quickly. This is for the NOCM nurse to fill out. I would like to add that these have been developed with the support of NOCM nurses over the years. Lots of heavy involvement with NOCM nurses who are already doing the work and have helped us to put this together. Okay, so their care plan will be filled out by their NOCM nurse. Right? They'll have the goals for. Whoops, sorry that it went away. Find it again. Oh, hang on. Let me freeze on my screen here and I will find you something that I'm going to look at here. Okay. Okay, so I may not be able to call these up right now because of new rules and about Adobe. Let's do something different. I will show you where to find them. I did put a copy of that I put a copy of both into the downloads and everyone can get a copy. Okay, so don't worry. That's the care plan. I'm going to switch a little bit here and I'm going to show you how to find them online. Okay, so we're going to take a look at our regulations. And so our online, it's effective today. So we're kind of in a transitional part here. We have our current but not yet effective section. Where I clicked was SDS regulations and related materials. Okay. So current but not yet effective, we have our NOCM care plan and training checklist. All right, so we had our care plan. Oh, okay. That's conditions of participation. Take a look at the training checklist.
Kara, the
yes.
training checklist, this is Dee, I'm sorry.
Yes.
The training checklist and the nursing care plan have been posted at noon on the approved forms.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at
so
that.
So you can find them there. That link was incorrect for the.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So approved program
but they're
forms.
Up. They're up, yeah.
Thank you. We're in transition. Okay, thank you, Dee. Approved program forms. So let's take a look. And they're looking for it for the first time, just like you.
They're uni.
So
they've got uni numbers. They're uni 17 and uni 18, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So we'll take a look at the care plan. There it is. And the nurse would fill this out. You can also look at it the same way, those of you who are in attendance. And if you're even, watching this on a recording, you can find it too, just like that. And the nurse would fill this out. All right. And notice that it does have a signature need right here. So here's where they sign and date. Okay. So I am going to go back. Let me find my pickup tool here, and I will go back and I will find the training checklist. So this has instructions. This is for a nurse to fill out. So where there's a few sections here. There's demographics, like it says here. There's mandatory training categories, which each individual, these would apply to all people served. And then there's individualized training categories, which may not apply to each person served. We have a nice long list. These are all different conditions a person may experience. And if they don't, that's okay. They don't have to be filled out, but we cannot delete them. They would have to put not applicable in that text box. And then there are unique training needs, which would be more like a narrative that would just apply to that person, something that we're not able to kind of categorize when it comes to the needs of CCMC. There's a section for comments and notes. There's initial where it comes to the nurse attestation, and then signatures of care providers. So the first section would be their little demographics here, and then mandatory training categories in the role of NOCM, role of care providers, infection control, OSHA guidelines, CPR, recognizing signs of illness, diet and nutrition, fluids and hydration, skin care, oral care, safety in car seats and restraints. Body mechanics, being outdoors, and hygiene and bathing. These are all things that we need some training for our staff or other people who will be doing that care for the person. Section 3 are optional depending on the needs of the person. Not applicable, it's okay to put that if it doesn't apply to the person, but they include allergies, blood pressure, tracheostomy care, artificial nose care and suctioning, nebulizer, chest percussion therapy, monitors cardiac and respiratory equipment. And this is common equipment that people may be using. Pulse oximetry, specialized feeding needs, central venous catheter, autonomic hyperreflexia, dysreflexia, seizure management, shunts and medications, and catheterization. Those are things that cares that a person may need on a regular basis that could be trained and or delegated to a caregiver. And a bowel and bladder program, therapy goals or developmental interventions, range of motion, the use of orthotics and splints, the use of a generator, diabetes care, sensory impairments or visual impairments, training regarding all of these topics if they pertain to the person. Section 4 is unique needs to the person. Additional aspects is just strictly a narrative. And then at the bottom, the attestation, which is initial that each training requirement has been developed and the nurse is attesting to that. And they sign, and the client, guardian, or parent or other legal authority will also sign, and the care providers who have been trained will sign. And there's plenty of room for lots of caregivers here. Okay, so that is a review of the training checklist, again, developed with the assistance of our existing NOCM nurses. All right, so I'm going to go back up to the top there. Write in your questions. We're kind of at the last minutes here of our presentation. I do want to offer a quick summary of main NOCM updates. It's not required, but requested by the care coordinator. With certain intent, services could start before NOCM or choose to receive it or not. A care coordinator will request it. A care coordinator should be able to explain how the service will meet regulatory requirements for NOCM and how the service will meet their needs and desired outcome. NOCM care plan is required and the training checklist is required. We already looked at that. In terms of using the care plan and the checklist, these forms that are newly required, you'll see an announcement go out on eAlert about when they are required. You do not have to go back and do work you already did. Generally, they'll be required 60 days after the day the notice comes out. So don't worry about having to do these or redo these imminently, okay? And this was the summary of things we talked about today: provider conditions of participation, specialized medical equipment list, NOCM conditions of participation, new regulations for NOCM, which include those documents, and our NOCM regulation purpose and review, comparing old to the new, the care plan form, and the training checklist. And we did a little Q&A.